There's a million ways to solve a problem. But how do you want to use your gifts, your talents, your experiences, your skills to solve that problem?
I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step.
Just let go.
Today we have Jaime Casap on the show. He is the former Chief Education Evangelist for Google. He was at Google for 14 years and he just recently left. So he's in this transition and we're catching him at a time where, like potentially many of you, he is trying to figure out what he's going to do next. So we dive into that, right? We dive into that messy middle. We dive into the delta between idea and action and this transition. If you are in, kind of an inflection period in your career or transition, then I think especially this will be relevant. And just in general, I think we all are, given the certain state that we live in. Now, Jaime he has an extremely innovative mind. So this episode is ripe with ways to think about things differently and reframe. We do dive into education briefly, but he talks about his philosophy of why we should stop thinking about what we want to do when we get older or what we want to do next, and instead start thinking about what problem do we want to solve and how do we want to solve that problem. And then work becomes life. So this was a really interesting kind of philosophy that Jaime shares, because if you are trying to figure out, what is it that I want to do next? Maybe you are considering entrepreneurship, or maybe you have a business and you're trying to kind of figure out where you want to go next. There are some key things that Jaime brings up for you to think about. In several cases across Jaime's career, he has found that his kind of big leaps forward have been as a result of realizing he was in a safe spot that he no longer belonged in, right? So in various jobs, in various situations, things were just a little too comfortable, or he had opportunities that popped up that just seemed so safe and secure, but not really what he wanted to do. So he talks about how he navigated moving away from those opportunities and toward what he really wanted to do. And in turn, that's what opened up different paths to, for example, Google. And he realizes his trajectory would have looked very different if he would have stayed or accepted the more safe route. We also talk a little bit about education being a mindset, not a process, and approaching our education in a non-linear way, and how that continues to provide dividends and we're able to see the rewards again and again and again versus thinking, okay, I'm going to get to this spot and I'm done. I'm done with my education then, or I'm going to graduate or get certified and get a certain credit for something and then be done. We're never really done. And how we can shift our mindset into living and practicing being in that mode of education every single day. So without further ado, here is Jaime, the former Chief Education Evangelist from Google. How we spend our days is how we spend our lives. For me, being able to design my own day is a non-negotiable. As many of you know, I'm a bit of a time management nerd. So when I find something that allows me to be more efficient and more effective, I want to share it with everyone. So here's the scoop. I have a new tool in my productivity tool belt, and I'm a bit obsessed. It's Monday.com. My team and I have never felt more organized, and I have a new sense of perceived control. My to-do list is no longer the boss of me. I feel more in control because every project, initiative, date, and task is captured and organized in one place. And my team is in the loop and involved every step of the way. With Monday.com, it's like I have a brand new operating system. There's no long list, and everything has its own home, its own deadline, its own team member that's assigned and associated, and it's color coordinated. We all have multifaceted jobs and businesses. There are many components to my business, and each and every one of them has its own compartment. Each division is always one click away. For example, my team and I have a dedicated board for this very podcast. Did you know there are 28 steps involved in getting one podcast to air? It's the same exact process every time. And it's a system. We have the various key steps mapped out as micro tasks. And this allows for my team and I to stay in lockstep every step of the way. With Monday.com, I can zoom out and see the big picture, a roadmap view from 30,000 feet. And a moment later, I can zoom in and focus on a specific micro task within a project, within a division of the company. I could go on and on about the features that Monday.com offers, one of which is I've built my social media content calendar inside of Monday.com. I finally have one that I actually use, that I like, and it's embedded into my overall Google Calendar. Another feature that I love is the Google Doc integration. You know I love a good spreadsheet. I can pull them into Monday.com and edit them right there versus having 97 tabs open on my computer. If how we spend our days is how we spend our lives, then I can't think of anything more important than using the time in our days wisely. Head to Monday.com if you want a free trial. And let me know on social media how it goes for you. Shoot me a DM. We can swap tips and tricks. Jaime, welcome to the Why Not Now show. I am very excited to have you on. And in the spirit of Why Not Now, let's get started. So, can you tell me about a time when you had a big decision to make and you asked yourself, why not now? We'll dissect that day, that minute, that hour, that season, and really understand how you went from idea to action.
Yeah, and thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be here. I think this is a wonderful podcast. I think it's a wonderful topic. I think it's great for people to be able to understand how people make decisions. I've learned a lot from other people making decisions, so I'm happy to be here. I think it's an important question because most of the time when you're making decisions like that, you don't realize that you're making those decisions. It just becomes part of your natural being from listening to and talking to other people in your past and your mentors and people who you consider advisors. And for me, I'm going through it right now, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a second, this idea of this transition of like, why not now? And especially during a pandemic and a meltdown, it seems, of social norms, right? So why not do it now? So I'm going through this now. But the story that I want to share with you actually took place back in 1995 when I was in a prestigious management internship program with New York State. I had graduated with my degree in public policy in 1993, and I wanted this position with New York State. It was one of the most prestigious in the country. It was this idea. It was kind of like the Navy SEALs of public managers. It was this idea that they would bring in talented people and expedite their growth to put them into leadership positions in state government or federal government or whatever other kind of policy positions. And I went interviewed. I was one of 55 people that were selected out of 1,000 people who applied for these roles, and I got the number one role that I wanted, which was to work with the Department of Social Services and the governor's office on welfare reform. And this was important to me because I grew up in the welfare system. I grew up in Hell's Kitchen, New York. I grew up with a single mother. I grew up on welfare and food stamps. And given that perspective and everything that I learned up to that point on welfare, I wanted to go and give back and be part of the solution. So this was a team that was made up of people from the Department of Education, Department of Labor, Department of Social Services, the governor's office. It was like a team of public servants that were working on solving welfare reform. And a lot of the things that we were working on were things that no one ever thought of. And I did that work, and it was amazing work. I was working with the governor, and I did that for 2 years. And then to the surprise of everyone, the governor did not get reelected, which meant all his programs were done, right? Which happens when administrations shift. So here we are, programs being shut down, and they're saying to me, my team is saying to me, look, we want to restart this at some point. It might be in a year, it might be in 5 years, but we want to keep doing this. So why don't you just hang out? And what hang out meant was they offered me a position in disability determination, right? That they were going to hide me in this role where I would literally be answering phone calls of patients and doctors and determining someone's eligibility for SSI. And I had a panic attack. And the balance between, having a job at the time, I was married, I had a 9-month-old, I had no assets, I had a 1984 Chevy Celebrity with rust all over it. We're living in an apartment, no savings, right? I'm 25 years old and this is the world that I was in. And they offered me a job that was going to pay me the same salary in a state role where in New York State, if you're not familiar, there are people who are golden handcuffed into their roles, right? I met people who are like 17 more years and I get to retire, right? Like they're in the system, they're stuck into that system. And I found myself in this position where, oh no, I'm going to get stuck in the system. This is not what I want to do. I want to solve problems. I don't want to sit on the phone with doctors. That's not what I want to do. And so my why not moment was that. And I said, you know what? I'm not doing that. I'm going to leave. And so I literally left a job with a 9-month-old and a wife, dropped her and a 9-month-old at her parents in Buffalo because we were living in Albany. And I drove my 1984 Celebrity with like $40 in my pocket across the country back to Phoenix with no prospects, no jobs. But that's where I went to graduate school. I went to Arizona State University.
Woo.
So at the very least, I had their career services to use. So I drove my car back to ASU with like $40, enough for gas when gas was 99 cents a gallon back then, and started looking for work. And then ended up working at Accenture. I got a job at Accenture. That's a whole other story. But got a job at Accenture, was Accenture for 7 years. And then from Accenture, I went off on my own for a little bit, did some consulting work. And then I got recruited by Charles Schwab. And I worked at Charles Schwab. And then I was at Google for 14 years. But none of that would have happened if I was safe, if I kept that job, if I took the safe route. And if a young person comes up to me and says, hey, listen, I'm thinking about like, I have no money, no nothing, even like now. And this is back when the economy wasn't all that great either. And I have nothing, but I'm thinking about driving across the country in my beat up car with no money to look for a job. I would say, you're insane. Don't do that, because that's the conventional wisdom to do. But these decisions are what set you up for decisions that you make for the rest of your life.
As I was listening to you, I wrote down the word safe, just taking notes of things I wanted to follow up with, like within the first minute of your story, because that would have been the safe thing to do, and it would have changed the entire trajectory, right? You can't imagine it ending up at Google. Most paths probably to Google are not the safe ones. So wow. So let's talk about, that was a major time of transition, and now you are in another one, right? So here we are, fast forward, and you've just left Google, right?
I did. I left Google. And the truth is, I did videos, not the truth is, but I made videos about my departure from Google, and Google went through a bunch of reorgs. And I could have stayed at Google, right? There's no way that Google would just let me go. I would have stayed. I actually kind of fought not staying. And I've been joking on stages for the last 3 years that I was looking for an opportunity to get fired from Google, right? Like that's been my joke for some time, because you have to recognize when you've done enough, right? When you can't do no more, and then it becomes safe again, right? So, when I joined Google 14 years ago, there was not a lot of work going on in education technology, and it all happened by mistake. I met with the CIO at Arizona State University because we had opened up an office in Phoenix, a Google office, and that's why I got recruited by Google to help run that office in Phoenix. And I went and met with different stakeholders in the Valley, including ASU, and asked the CIO what his biggest problem was at the time. And his biggest problem was email. And back in 2006, students were not using their given email address. They were using their Hotmail accounts or their Gmail accounts. And so you had professors at the university trying to collect information from students and keep it on a spreadsheet. And it was just a giant mess.
That was literally me, by the way. So I graduated in 2001, and I don't think I ever used my ASU email. I had AOL and Hotmail. Yeah.
Yeah. You had professors asking students for their email address, and you have these, professors with all these credentials writing out, I'm sorry, your email is hotmama69 at Hotmail. Hang on, let me write that down. Right?
Yeah.
It was an insane world. And so I said, hey, we got this product called Google for Your Domain. We should think about how we can set up ASU as a .edu on the platform. So you're using our platform, but you're controlling it. And then the next thing you know, we launched Google Apps for Education into the university space. And I fell in love with the idea of what we could do with technology in education. And so I was here's another moment of the why not now kind of thing is I was actually on the engineering team. I was part of Google Engineering, and I actually switched from engineering to the enterprise team. And I don't know if anyone ever at Google has ever done that, right? Like engineering is the place to be at Google, right? Being part of the engineering team is it. I was actually an engineering manager at one point, and I switched over to enterprise so that I can work in this space. And so I joined a team, and it was just two of us when we launched Google Apps for Education. Then I worked with a bunch of universities, and then I had this crazy idea of launching these tools into K-12. Worked with the product team on creating some things that needed to be done to make sure it was safe enough for the K-12 world. We launched it in the K-12. I signed a state-level deal with Oregon, and I worked with a bunch of school systems from that. So we went from literally 30,000 users to by the time I left, it was close to 100 million users using these tools at school systems and universities around the world. But the craziest idea I had was when I saw this internal tool at Google called a Chromebook. And I went to the Chromebook team and I pitched this idea around bringing the Chromebook into education. Because Google wasn't an education team, education organization. Our team was 5 people at the time. And, through back and forth and trying to prove why this was a good idea, eventually I got enough support to go out on the road for 6 months with literally like 10 Pelican cases of Chromebooks, and to have these sessions in our offices. We didn't even have enough budget to set them up in hotels. We had to use our offices and invite tech directors in to look at the Chromebook, understand its functionality, and talk about why. It was a paradigm shift to think about computing in a different way. And again, got a couple of schools interested. And next thing you know, we have 40, 50 million students using these tools in schools around the world. And so I did that. And if you think about the pandemic, and I've had many people reach out to me and say, man, if it wasn't for these tools, we wouldn't be doing education at all right now. So you don't even think about what your impact can be. You just think about the challenge in front of you and you take that on. And then I launched something internally called the Transformation Center, which was a way to think about transforming schools. So I did those things at Google, and there wasn't really anything else for me to do. And I could have, been safe and stayed there and continued my role. But I really want to focus on the critical issues in education around equity, around diversity, around inclusion. And Google has done its part, and it's funding programs and doing its thing. But I want to get specific in some programs and projects that I want to work on. And so it was time for me to go find other ways to do that and not doing it at Google. And so here we are. So, maybe, 6 months from now, I'll be living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Apache Junction, but I think I'll be okay.
I think you'll be okay too. Well, the mirror, I mean, that safety almost kind of has crept up several times in your career that, this is the sure thing route, comfy corporate job. It was a pretty sweet gig, but you didn't end up choosing that. And so here you are now. A lot of people listening they're at a career inflection point, a transition, a change. A lot of people have lost jobs. A lot of people are thinking, wow, especially with the shakeup of the, public health crisis, economic crisis, cultural crisis, they're thinking, I'm going to go do what I really want to do finally and maybe leave corporate. So as you're in this phase, what has been helpful to you during this time? I know it's brand new, but as your days have shifted, I imagine, and any thoughts for people right now, given you're in this spot right now?
Yeah, so this part is easy for me because I've been preaching this other idea for years, and I can't tell you how many people have come up to me, and even in my messages, I'm going to put some of these messages I received on my website when I create my website, but some of the messages about how I transformed the work that they do based on this one thing that I've been talking about for years, which is more focused on students, but works for adults as well, which is we need to stop asking students what they want to be when they grow up. That's a ridiculous question. That question used to make sense when we were kids, or I was a kid because I'm an old man. But when I was a kid, jobs didn't change that much. There was a lot more stability. There wasn't a shift. When I graduated from graduate school, companies like Netflix and Google and Amazon did not exist, right? So I couldn't prepare for jobs like that because they didn't exist. And the same thing's happening now faster and faster. So what we should be asking students instead is, what problem do you want to solve, right? What's the problem that spins in your head? And focusing on work as a problem. And I have a couple of videos on my YouTube channel about this idea. And it works with adults as well. What's the problem that you want to solve? And then here's the part that you really need to spend some time thinking about. How do you want to solve it? Because there's a million ways to solve a problem. But how do you want to use your gifts, your talents, your experiences, your skills to solve that problem? For example, with students, if a student said, I want to solve climate change, people might say to that student, oh, you need to be a scientist. You need to study STEM. You need to study, get a degree in global sustainable development. But in reality, your skill, your talent, you might be a gifted photographer. You might be one of the most amazing photographers that people buy prints from or always want to take pictures. But your passion and talents around photography, and the way you can solve climate change is by going out and documenting climate change. Or if you are interested in education, maybe the way you can solve climate change is by going out and teaching a class on climate change, or creating a program for climate change, or creating an experiential program for climate change for students. So there's millions of ways to solve a problem. So how do you want to solve it is important. And you have to really understand who you are and what you are and what your skills are. And there's a number of assessments that you can go and do to kind of start narrowing that down. And then the third thing I talk to students about, and again, for adults, this works as well, what do you need to know to solve that problem? What are the knowledge, the skills, and the abilities that you need to have to solve that problem? And how do you start building those knowledge, skills, and abilities? And if you take that as a whole thing, right, what problem do you want to solve? How do you want to solve it? And what do you need to know to solve it? It is what motivates all human beings. I don't know if you've had a chance to talk to Daniel Pink, who's a friend of mine, but in his book Drive, he wrote the thing that motivates all human beings. It's the same three things. What problem you want to solve, you want to solve it, and what do you need to master to solve that problem? And if you can spend time thinking about that, the rest of it is easy. And for me, it's easy, right? The problem I'm trying to solve is equity in education. How do I want to solve it? Well, I got 5 or 6 different ways that I want to solve it. What do I need to know? I know a lot, but I need to know more things. And that's what I'm working on now, is that more things part, and identifying more people that I need to connect with and more organizations that I need to connect with. So it becomes easy for me, because if you focus on that problem, then it's not work anymore. It's just your life. And, you know, I hear baseball players say all the time, I can't believe they pay me to play this game. And when you find that problem and you get that passion behind you, you feel the same way. It's not work.
I could not agree more about the whole, you know, we need to stop asking. Not only students and kids, but I mean, adults need this, right? So yes, it's great to reach the younger generations early so they have even more time to spend on the problems they want to solve. But think of how many people right now, this is a complete reframe for them and how they've engineered their life and careers, because in some ways this is nonlinear too. It's not like, you know, you reverse engineer from a certain degree. Yes, you might need that for that third bucket you said. What do you need to know? But first start at the meta level, right? Not just I want to be a lawyer. Okay.
Right. Well, here's a real story, true story that happened to a friend of mine, because like I said, this isn't just for students. Adults need to understand this concept as well. And this adult friend of mine, HR executive, unbelievably talented, made, $125,000, $150,000 base salary, miserable in her life, miserable in the job. She's working 16 hours a day at some kind of like lipstick tube company, right? Like is spending all her time, 16 hours a day doing this work that she's not passionate about, but because of the linear aspects of careers, which is you get this job and then you get this job and then you get this job and you kind of grow that path, she ended up being miserable. And when I asked her that question, what's the problem that she wanted to solve, she had to spend some time thinking about it. And through reflection and working with me, and I'm not a personal coach, but she's a friend, so we worked through some ideas. And what she realized is that she had 4 rescue dogs at home, and that she spent her weekends with rescue animals, and that she spent her weekends at shelters. And then what she realized is that's her passion, right? That rescue animals and working with sanctuaries and working with rescue centers. And I'm like, you're a talented HR professional. You don't think these places need HR help, right? And now all of a sudden, now she created a consulting company that works with shelters on their recruiting strategies, and works on their volunteer programs, on their HR policies. And she travels around working with all these shelters, making $150,000 a year or whatever. But now she's doing what she's passionate about. Do you see the switch there? Mm-hmm. It's the same work. It's just on the passion. She's taking her skills and putting it against passions that she didn't even know she had.
Yes, and that's what I love. You don't have to necessarily throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to your career collateral and that equity of what you know, because she probably feels 180 different, but it was probably a 20-degree shift, right? It wasn't like she had to go off and learn how to knit and or do something completely different. So those skills, the passion, the purpose of skills are aligned. I love it. Okay, I would love to hear from you if you could share the story about the time, I think you said it was 2006, you walked into a meeting at Google dressed as you normally do, t-shirt, jeans, and you were like, oh shit, I don't belong here. What? And just about fitting in general, Jaime. I think that's just such a topic that you really own and exude, is that just the concept of not having to fit in.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've never been able to, given my background, given the way I grew up, I'm a first generation American, and, I'm a hoodlum, and I'm a proud hoodlum, and this is how I grew up. I don't get to meet a lot of people like me in the positions I end up in, right? It's always one thing or another. Somebody will come up to me and say, I also grew up poor. My parents worked hard. And I'm like, you missed one of the factors, right? Like I never get to meet someone who has my exact background. And so I've always had a trouble fitting in. And it comes down, and I did a video on this as well, around imposter syndrome. You feel like an imposter. And, there's a story about me at Accenture where I decided that I wasn't going to dress like everyone else. I was going to dress like I was comfortable. And what that brought me to my part in my career that makes me feel comfortable in skin. But even when you do that, you still feel moments of, whoa, I don't fit in here. And that moment that you're mentioning was when I was early at Google. I went into a meeting. It was a Go Present Something meeting, and I was there with the CIO. Like I said, I was working in engineering. I was working for the CIO at the time. And I walked into a meeting. And one of the things I loved about Google, and this was like 3 months into Google, was I felt at home there. I felt like there's all these like crazy looking people, and there's purple guy who wore purple clothes every single day. You could wear whatever you want. You could be in flip flops. You can wear in tank top. And I felt like this is my place. I belong here. But then when this meeting happened, and it was with Larry and Sergey and Eric and Jonathan and all the big wigs at Google, as they're coming in to the meeting, they're dressed like professionals, right? Eric Schmidt is wearing black slacks and a really nice Brooks Brothers shirt. And Jonathan walks in with nice slacks and a Brooks Brothers shirt. And they're all like, and I'm sitting there thinking, oh man, I gotta step up my dressing game. I felt uncomfortable in my jeans and t-shirt. Like I felt like, oh no, I have to be an imposter again. And as I'm having this thought, Sergey walks in like basketball shorts, an bright orange tank top, and his Air Force Ones undone and his tank top, and his hair all messed up, and ready to come run the meeting. And I'm like, nope, this is home. I can be me here, right? And it was this, and you have these moments that you have to look for that kind of confirm who you are and what you believe. But you also have to understand that those feelings of being an imposter, like I said in my video, or those feelings of not feeling like you belong, are constantly there. You have to constantly fight them. You just have to be conscious that you're having them so that you can fight them.
Yes, I love it. I also love what you said too about at Google, it didn't matter what you looked like, what mattered, what was in your head. That's a pretty big statement, especially just the world we live in, to be able to kind of, leapfrog that appearance, and seeing it at the top with Sergey. I imagine that's going to set the tone. But I love that story.
The whole idea of what's in your head is as you were saying, that one of the things that I'm going to both miss and I'm glad I'm not doing anymore is having these debates with people who are so much smarter than you are, right? Like, it's great that it's what's in your head, but some of these heads are really powerful heads. And so part of me is going to miss those debates that I lost, 53% of those debates, because I'm dealing with really smart people. But so what's in your head matters a great deal. And that's what I like about not having a dress code as an issue, not creating class systems that somebody can walk in a tank top and lay out an argument that you have to buy because of what's in the person's head, not because of they're dressed in a nice suit.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Are you ready for change? Or maybe you're already in a season of expansion. As we embrace this new decade, are you ready to take action on your own why not now idea? Maybe that means starting the company, launching the podcast, writing the book, or doing more public speaking, injecting your why into what you are doing. At the end of the day, that is exactly what creates connection. And connections convert. My life work is to help guide women through this very stage in their life. I do this through the Renegade Brand Bootcamp. It truly is the career love of my life. The reason I love this program so much is because I'm able to create a mosaic, a collection of like-minded, like-hearted, driven women who come together to level up. They learn the renegade mentality directly from me, and I share everything I've learned over the past 20 years in business. It's equal parts education, collaboration, accountability, and community. We are accepting applications for our 2020 program, and you are welcome to go check everything out about the program at renegadebrandbootcamp.com. And as a very first step, just sign up for my 5-day email series. I uncover all of the questions about the bootcamp and help you understand if it's right for you. We've had some incredible women come through the program, and you will hear from them as well. You can check out the curriculum, the structure, the vibe, and everything in between. Many years ago, I went to Mark Cuban and asked him for investment advice. I thought I was going to get some real estate or stock market type of advice. Instead, he said, invest in yourself. Invest in your own growth. Invest in yourself. Bet on yourself. This is the best ROI you will ever find. If you're at that point where you are ready to take action, head to renegadebrandbootcamp.com. I would love to talk to you a little bit about online education and just the disruption with education right now. But also, I recently had Professor Scott Galloway on, which I don't know if you two know each other, but if you don't, you totally should, because I think you could probably work some magic. And we're talking about the disruption, but also a lot of people listening are entrepreneurs who have expertise and they're productizing their intellectual property by creating online courses, right? So not necessarily your academic institutional education, but just online courses, which have been incredible for me. I know during the pandemic, I'm not traveling, which I usually am, spending so much time on planes. I've got a little more time. And I've been taking classes of things that I'm interested in. What are your thoughts around some, how we've democratized online education? Because you've worked with huge institutions like ASU, go Sun Devils, but also we have Jill who has a bakery and she's teaching other bakers how to do business or whatever online. What are some of the things we should be looking for, or as people are building their own courses? I know you always talk about the student and keeping the student in mind. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts around what we can be expecting, what we can do better as we're creating courses.
Yeah, so I think that's great, and so here's what's happening, and it's dreamy for me, right? Which is that education is everyone sees education as a process, right? Something that you go through. You are educated. You go through third grade and ninth grade and graduate school. You are an educator. You are a student, right? We have all these terms, even the word course. You have a course. You have all these things. It's a process. And what I think people are waking up to, and what I hope people are waking up to, something I've been talking for a decade about, is that education isn't a process, it's a mindset. And a mindset where you are constantly and continuously learning. And this is, look, I remember graduating from ASU graduate school, and I remember sitting there hitting my last 60-page paper in my public policy class and hitting print at, I was using WordPerfect 5.1, and I hit print and I sent that paper to my dot matrix printer. So I had 45 minutes to kill. Yep. And I remember sitting there thinking, I am done. I don't have to do this anymore. I am done learning, right? That wasn't true 25 years ago. And I think what's happening is a realization that it's definitely not true today. And so if you look at education as a mindset, as it changes the conversations in your heads. Like, how many adults do you know? You've probably have talked to more people than I have, but how many people you know who say, I'm not very creative. I'm not good at math. I'm not good at finance. I'm not good with this entrepreneurial thing, right? And my response back, and this is why I don't have a lot of friends, my response back to these people is always, no, you've chosen not to be creative. You've chosen not to be good at math. You've chosen not to be an entrepreneur. Because everything that you need to do those things is out there. And it's a matter of you deciding that it's a mindset that's just from not, I'm not very creative, to I need to learn how to be more creative. How can I learn how to be more creative? And then how do I know whether I'm creative or not? It becomes a shift in people's heads about what they know and what they don't know. And the fact that you could learn, like you're talking about learning, you could sit there at your laptop or your YouTube videos or your course and learn for 16 hours, go to bed, and the next day do it all over again because your brain is empty again. You can fill it every single day. So it doesn't become a question of not knowing. It becomes a question of choosing not to know and then making a decision as to whether you want to know or not. And so I think the same thing is true for people that are putting information, that are putting content out there. Like my YouTube channel is content. My YouTube channel is about the things that I know that I want to put out there. I've been approached by a number of organizations that want me to build a course on presentation skills and how I do keynotes. And so I could do that. So I think that we have to get away from the, how do I take a course for credit, but more in how do I build skills? Mm-hmm. And when you start looking at it like, how do I build skills? You worry less about which course requirements you need to meet and more about the skills that you're building and then demonstrating whether you've built those skills or not. And I think that there's so much content out there and there's so much great information that you can literally learn how to do anything. And as long as it's not physically impossible, right? Like I can learn how to dunk a basketball, but there's no way I can dunk a basketball anymore, right? But there is things out there that anyone can learn, and it changes that mindset of I don't know how to do something, and it changes it because of what's available. to there's nothing you can't learn how to do.
I love that. From a process to a mindset, it's like a practice, a daily practice. Okay, so I noticed, speaking of your YouTube channel, which is amazing, by the way, everybody should check it out, and we'll drop it in the show notes. Your most recent one, you're in Greer, Arizona, which I spent 20 years in Arizona, so I'm just like, yes. And you were talking about your astrophotography, which is fascinating. This is a hobby of yours, it sounds like. Is this something, as you're in this, I'm going to call it, I hate the word transition because I swear I've been in one for 5 years and I just am doing a lot of different things and couldn't be happier. But since there's been a recent structural form or career shift, have you found yourself doing more hobbies lately, or is that something you've always done?
Yeah, so this goes back to another kind of mindset, a philosophy, and this is old. I mean, this is 20 years old. I never understood the concept of work and life balance, right? Like, for me, it's always just been life, right? And so you get to pick and choose whatever it is that you want to do at that moment. Thank you for shouting out my YouTube channel. One of the ones that has resonated quite a bit with people is the one that I did about to-do lists, right? We all have our methodology for to-do lists, and mine's a little unique, which is that I put it on Post-it notes, and then I stick those Post-it notes up on a wall. And the reason I do that is because it doesn't create a linear aspect. It doesn't say, here's my list of things, and most people are used to starting at the top and then going down the list. And for me, I want to look at all of it and then think about what mood I'm in, what state I'm in, what I'm capable of doing at the moment, and then pick that one off and do that one, right? I know what I need to do 1 and 2 and 3, like I get that. But for all the other stuff, you put it up on the wall and then you pick and choose. And last night, and so my photography, I've always been a photographer. The stars thing is recent. I've only been doing that for a year. I just, you've been in, Arizona. The Greer, Arizona is one of the most perfect dark sky places. And I went out last year, just again, I wasn't an astrophotographer. The concept was, I think I can learn how to be an astrophotographer. And I went out and experimented. And if you saw the first 10 pictures I took, they're terrible. But I got better and better. And I went out every night for a week and got better at it. And I'm still not good at it. And I'm getting better and better and better. And it's the whole learning process of experiencing it and then adjusting to that experience and learning, and not saying I don't know how to do something, saying, I need to figure out how to do it. And it's funny because you mentioned this whole thing about hobbies. I don't think of hobbies. I think of last night. This is a real story from last night. I'm sitting at my desk, and we're staying on an Airbnb in Flagstaff. And this Airbnb is literally on the highway. And we're staying here for like 2 months because, it's 190 degrees in Phoenix. And we're staying on the highway. So I've been watching these cars go by all day. And so last night, I brought my tripod out, I brought my camera out, and I wanted to take some light photography with the cars on the highway and the stars in the background. And so that was just the choice that I made. It's not a hobby. It's me, right? I don't get to pick one or the other. That's what I wanted to do then. Today, I'm going to work all day. That's what I want to do. Next week, I actually booked 2 nights at the North Rim at the Grand Canyon because I want to go do more astrophotography. So it's life. It's just picking and choosing, understanding what your priorities are. But I don't like hobbies. I don't like the idea of hobbies. I like the idea of just life, and you pick the things that make you happy and that bring you joy as part of your life.
That's a great point. I've thought a lot lately about how there are no longer hobbies. It's all side hustles, right? Everybody just wants to make money off their hobbies, right? I'm like, we used to call that like a hobby or something you enjoy doing. And now there's so much pressure to just monetize.
Well, what's interesting about that is if you go out and do it and enjoy it and get better at it, the monetization comes later. That's one of the great things about working in a technology space. The old model used to be build something cool and then figure out how to make money on it later, right? That model has changed a lot lately, where it's like, no, what's the monetization strategy right up front? And I think we're missing something in the technology world when it comes to that, because the interesting thing about my photography is if you go to my, either Instagram or my Twitter account, it says professional photographer because I've sold prints. I've had people want to buy prints from me. And that's all completely reactive, right? I took a moonshot on July 4th, and I have somebody who wants to buy one of the prints for me. And so the monetization, if you focus on your hobby or your life thing and you want to get good at it and you get good at it, the monetization might come, might not come, but you're still getting joy from it. So for me, now I'm in this debate space around like, should I create a page with some of my best photography that I can sell as a, side hustle? Doesn't matter if I make money or not. It's just fun. But if I wanted to take it to the next level, could I? Maybe. That's what you can do, right? And so it becomes more focused on what you're passionate about. And again, there's two things here that we're talking about, which are very interesting that I've been really given a lot of thought to that we need to speak more of, which is there's the things that people say, find what you love to do and then go find a way to make money doing it. Well, I also love sitting on the couch, eating Ben & Jerry's and watching Game of Thrones. There's not a lot of money in that space, right? The passion part of this, the part that I was talking about is the work, the passion, the problem that you want to solve sometimes is a miserable experience. I don't want to get on airplanes. I don't want to travel around the world. I don't want to do these things, but I do it because of the passion drives me. The things that you love to do are the things like the photography and the YouTube channel and those things. And so you do both at the same time. You can find your passion and the thing that drives you, and you can find the things that you love to do and potentially make money doing both things.
Absolutely. You're exploring that right now. It's like a cauldron of everything you love. And it's amazing how it starts to fit together in ways that you would never imagine either if you tried to take that linear approach. So I would love to hear your out of office philosophy. I think people need to hear this for vacations. Just real quick, because it's value, Jaime. It's value.
Yeah. All right. So I'll tell you, this has happened, I don't know, like 10 years ago at Google, where everyone experiences this, right? And it was, you go out on vacation for 2 or 3. I got to the point where I didn't want to go on vacation anymore because, we don't go to factories and make things where someone can come in and replace us for 2 weeks. Our work piles up. When we're not doing our work, it piles up. Mm-hmm. And so I would go on vacation for 2 weeks. The longer you go on vacation, the worse it is. I like to go on big vacations. So I go away for 3 weeks. I come back and I got 10,000 emails. So instead of coming in fresh and ready to focus on what I want to do, I come in and I spend 2 weeks answering emails. And you think, I'll just go through these quickly. And 2 weeks later go by and you're still answering emails. So 10 years ago, I said, let's try something different. And so my out of office message said, hey, look, I'm leaving on this day. I'm not checking messages. I'm not going through email. If it's urgent, contact me here or contact this person. And I'm coming back on this day. And you should know that when I come back, I'm going to highlight and archive and delete all my emails. And I'm going to start from that day. So if you want to reach me, send me an email on that day. And the funny thing is that the reaction from people that you tell the story to are like, oh my God, I could never do that. I'll get fired, and my customers. But the reaction from the people who send you emails were like, okay, cool. And then they just made a note. And then I come back to work and I start, hey, I was going to email you over August. And then it became just a normal thing for people that I communicated with. They just knew I was on vacation and I wouldn't get any. I would come back and my inbox would have like 12 emails in it because people got used to that idea that I did that anyway. So they wouldn't send me emails. And so I took a risk doing that and it paid off great because the worst thing in the world is to sit there and go through email. You feel like you're productive, but you're not being productive. If you're not creating, you're not being productive.
Oh, I love that so much. What's one thing, Jaime, that you find yourself learning over and over?
Well, so here's what's, I tell people all the time that I'm 52. My 50s, I would say even late 40s to now 50s have been amazing. This is so far my favorite decade because you are inside the matrix. You have gone through all the pattern recognitions. You walk into a meeting and you know exactly how it's going to go. You know exactly what everyone's going to say. You know exactly how it's going to turn out. So given that predictability, you have to look for those patterns and recognize things. And so I walk into a meeting, I know exactly what's going to happen in a meeting. So I can have a 3-minute meeting because you're going to say this, and then you're going to say this, and you're going to say this, and this is what we're going to decide. So let's just make that decision right now. So it becomes this pattern recognition that happens to you as you have more experiences. And so the lessons that I've been learning over and over have become patterns for me. And I use those patterns with an understanding that I can skip ahead because I don't have to learn the lesson over and over again. I know exactly what's going to happen.
Interesting. Do you have like any examples or anything? Not to put you on the spot.
No. I think it's a great concept. I think the one thing I keep learning over and over again, and you keep working on this, is getting people to write down commitments to things, right? Like, so the lesson I learned is if you and I say, hey, let's get together in 6 months and talk about this, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, yeah, cool. And then we disengage. I won't hear from you again. I know that, right? I have to keep remembering to say, okay, why don't we just sit down with our calendars right now and block it out? Or if someone says, hey, I'll get you that document next week. And I'm like, actually, let's commit to a date. What date? And I keep learning that lesson over and over again because I'm a trusting person. Mm-hmm. And so I don't want to say to someone that I don't know or someone who's equal to me to say, no, I need a commitment date from you, right? Like I need, you have to send it to me by Tuesday at 3 p.m. or whatever. I don't know how specific you want to get, but that lesson of like, no, I can trust them to come up with and it never works. It never happens. I learned that lesson over and over again. So what I try to do through pattern recognition is to build commitment into the conversations. And so at the end of a conversation, at the end of the meeting, I had one earlier today where I was talking to a founder of a company who wants me to be an advisor to their company. And like, I'll send you the information. And so in this conversation, I said, because it wasn't an equal conversation, it was him asking me for something. I said, yeah, when are you going to send it to me? Mm-hmm. And it took him by surprise a little bit. It's like, I'll send it to you by Monday. I'm like, cool, I'll make a note of that. I'll see that Monday then, right? And if you just do those little things, you can be more efficient and more effective with your time. I need to keep doing that over and over. I always forget to do it, or I trust the person, or I'm embarrassed to ask, mm-hmm. or I feel like I'm putting the person on the spot, all those things. But that's one of the lessons I keep learning over and over again.
That's such a good one. Just commitments, writing down commitments. You said building commitments into conversation. So good. So I have a few rapid fire questions for you. What keeps you up at night?
The well-being of my kids.
What's something that you've read recently that's been interesting that you'd recommend?
So one of the things, again, lessons learned, I realized that, like many people, you buy books and they end up just piling up, right? Look, I want to read this book. I want to read this book. And so you have like 30 books sitting there, or you have 90 books on your Kindle and you don't read any of them. So one of the things that I've been doing a lot lately is getting into audiobooks, because I spend a lot of time like you, in airports where I can listen mm-hmm. while I'm walking through an airport. And so I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks. And I just listened to, somebody recommended it and it was great, was Gary Vaynerchuk's book, Crushing It. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's many people who are like, you and Gary need to get together, or you guys need to talk. I don't know Gary, but his view and my view in terms of how to do stuff is very similar. But he has this great kind of laid out plan of how to be a product, how to be a business, how to be a brand. And I think lots of people need to look at that. And he's able to kind of shut down any excuse that you have around, I don't have time, or I can't do that, or I'm not an expert. I bought a physical copy of it for my wife, who's a triathlete and trying to grow her brand, and gave it to her. And she's got 10,000 followers on her Instagram account, right? Because it's a great way to lay out how you are a personal brand. And this is very in line with how I see the world. There's a great Jay-Z line on one of Kanye West's albums where he says, I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman, right? And that line, that you're not a businessman, you're a business. Mm-hmm. And so Gary does a great job kind of laying out how you're a business and what you can do to be a business and how you can create businesses out of side hustles. It's a great book.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Pirates or ninjas, Jaime? Who's tougher and why?
It's funny. I like ninjas. And it's funny. My daughter, my 5-year-old, is obsessed with ninjas. Her answer is always like, I'm going to, like, this literally happened last night at dinner. I'm like, I'm going to strap a GoPro to your head because she comes back from camp with these amazing stories. And I'm like, I need to see what's going on. And she's like, what do you mean? Because she doesn't understand the concept. And I'm like, I want to go see what you're doing. And her response is, well, you're going to have to be a ninja, right? Like to her, that a concept of ninja is being sneaky and coming in quietly and causing lots of damage, but without causing a lot of waves, right? I've never really got into pirates and ninjas. And if there's anything that I want to learn that the only thing I'd say I might be too old to, but of course I'm not, is to like learn martial arts, right? Like I grew up in the 70s going to 42nd Street watching Bruce Lee movies, right? So I've always been enamored by people who can do martial arts and ninjas and all of that, right? So that's where I kind of lay my hat is around ninjas.
I love it. I love it. Fair enough. Great backup, by the way. I love the thought process. Shannon Lee, Bruce's daughter, is a friend of mine, and she's been on the podcast. So she's a great listen. Yeah, she's got some stories and just his philosophy and how she's continued to innovate. His legacy is amazing.
I still watch some of his videos, by the way. He's just amazing.
His mind and just what he was able to accomplish in his short life is just incredible. And final question, Jaime, if you were to go back to that 25-year-old who's in New York trying to decide, am I going to stay safe and go with this other position that you did not want to take, or head off and drive west in your vehicle to ASU, what advice would you give him?
Oh man, that's a great question. And I often think about that. Like, what would I do differently? And I don't regret anything that's happened or any decisions that I made because it's made me who I am today. But the one thing I would tell my 25-year-old is that everything's going to be good, that everything's going to work out. And I think that I got lucky, and I talk about that sometime in my last video is about luck. I got lucky up at Accenture because the truth is, as much as it was a crazy idea to get in my car and drive to Arizona, I still had a family to support. I still had kids to feed. I still had to do that. So if I got a job, working at MCI, being a training development manager, I would have taken it, right? I just got lucky that it was Accenture that was the one who called and wanted to interview me and talk about what I did in government. So I would have told that person to hold off for the right job. And I got lucky that I got the right job. But it was a close call. It was one, who's going to come first, right? Whoever comes first is getting the gig. I just knew I didn't want to be a disabled. I didn't want to work answering phone calls. As long as it wasn't that, I would have taken anything good. I'm glad I got the opportunity to work at Accenture. It was like the Navy SEALs of the business world, and I got lucky. So I would have told myself to hang on to something that's really powerful where you can really build skills.
Very cool. It's amazing how many, I talk to a lot of people, and that's something that a lot of people would tell their younger selves is that everything, it is going to work out. And it's like we have to remind ourselves, even as adults sometimes, that's what we would tell ourselves, just like stay in your day. It is going to work out. But thank you so much, Jaime, for your time and wisdom. And I so appreciate and respect what you've done and what you're continuing to do. And I'm grateful. So thank you so much.
Thank you. This is the most fun I've had on a podcast.
Wow. That's awesome. I'm grateful for that too. So that makes me very happy. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your Why Not Now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Brewer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time. And until then, why not now?